Welcome back to Superbike Intelligence. Honestly, it's good to have you here. This channel has always felt less like a YouTube page and more like that late-night garage conversation you end up having when the bikes are cooling down, the helmets are on the bench, and someone finally says the thing everyone's been thinking. So settle in, and hey, if you enjoy this kind of real talk about motorcycles, the kind that isn't sponsored, filtered, or chasing trends, tap like, hit subscribe, and stick around. No pressure. Just saying, you might feel at home here. Because today we're talking about something that quietly divides riders more than engine layouts or tire brands ever could. We're talking about Suzuki. And more specifically, this idea that Suzuki builds bikes for riders, not influencers. Now that sentence alone is enough to annoy people on both sides. Some hear it and nod immediately. Others roll their eyes and say, "Here we go again." And that's exactly why it matters. Because motorcycles aren't just machines, they're identity, they're self-image. They're what you choose to swing a leg over when no one's watching, and what you're willing to defend when everyone is. Picture this for a second. Early morning, cold air. You thumb the starter in a quiet street before sunrise. No cameras, no audience. Just the sound of an engine clearing its throat, settling into a familiar idle. That moment, that's who Suzuki designs for. Not the guy holding a drone, not the perfectly framed Instagram reel. The rider who's already half smiling inside their helmet before the bike even moves. And here's where things get uncomfortable. Because we live in a motorcycle culture now that's deeply visual. Everything is about presence, about looking fast, about looking premium, about being photographed next to coffee shops with perfect lighting, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Bikes can be art, bikes can be fashion, but Suzuki has never really played that game. At least not convincingly. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. Suzuki bikes don't beg for attention. They don't shout about innovation with marketing buzzwords. They don't redesign themselves every year just to stay relevant on a feed. Instead, they show up quietly confident, slightly stubborn, and very aware that the person riding them probably cares more about the ride than the reaction. That philosophy rubs some people the wrong way. Because if a bike doesn't immediately impress online, does it even matter anymore? If it doesn't dominate comparison charts or flood social media with press launches and cinematic edits, is it falling behind? Or is it doing something far more rebellious, opting out? Think about the riders who swear by Suzuki, not casually like it's a brand preference. I mean, properly defended, the ones who've ridden everything else and still came back. Ask them why, and they won't give you a polished answer. They'll talk about feel, about trust, about how the bike never tried to surprise them, except in good ways, about how it felt honest. And honesty is dangerous in a world built on hype. Suzuki's reputation isn't flashy, it's resilient. There's a reason you still see older Suzukis out there being ridden hard instead of preserved as collectibles. There's a reason people buy them secondhand without fear. There's a reason so many riders describe them with words like bulletproof, no nonsense, or does exactly what I asked. Those aren't marketing phrases. Those are survival traits. But here's the controversial bit, and this is where the comments usually start heating up. Suzuki doesn't chase you. If you're the kind of rider who needs constant reassurance that you bought the right bike, Suzuki probably isn't for you. It won't validate you online. It won't spoon-feed you excitement. It expects you to ride it, live with it, and understand it. That's a very old-school relationship. It reminds me of group rides where one bike always shows up that doesn't fit the trend. Everyone else is talking about launch events, electronics updates, resale values, and there's one rider leaning on a slightly scuffed Suzuki, helmet scratched, boots worn in, listening quietly. Then the ride starts. And halfway through the twisty section, you realize something. That rider isn't trying to impress anyone. They're just riding. Smooth, confident, comfortable. Like they've been here before. Suzuki builds bikes for that rider. Now compare that to the influencer-driven side of modern motorcycling. Bikes chosen for thumbnails, for brand partnerships, for optics. Again, not wrong, just different. Those bikes often feel like statements before they feel like companions. They're incredible machines, no doubt, but sometimes they feel like they're performing even when you're not. Suzukis don't perform, they participate. They don't flatter your ego, they reward your input. They don't distract you with drama, they give you space to focus. And that creates a weird kind of loyalty, the kind that doesn't scream online but lasts decades in garages. And yes, Suzuki gets criticized for it. People call them boring, outdated, behind the times. They point at design language, at conservative updates, at the lack of constant reinvention. But here's the question no one asks loudly enough. Boring to who? Because to a rider who measures joy in miles rather than likes, boring can be perfect. Predictable can be comforting. Familiar can be freeing. When the bike disappears beneath you and the ride becomes the focus, that's not boring. That's motorcycling in its purest form. There's a moment every rider knows. Late at night, road empty. You're cruising just fast enough to feel alive but slow enough to think. No audience, no performance. Just the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the road. That moment doesn't care about brand image. It cares about connection. And Suzuki has quietly mastered that. Halfway through this conversation, let me pause and say this. If you're nodding along or shaking your head or itching to argue with me already, that's exactly why this channel exists. Drop a comment, hit like if this resonates, subscribe if you enjoy these unfiltered conversations. Because the best part of motorcycling isn't agreement, it's discussion. Back to Suzuki. What really separates them isn't what they build, it's what they refuse to become. They've resisted turning motorcycles into lifestyle accessories. They've resisted chasing trends that dilute the ride itself. They've stayed stubbornly focused on the core experience, even when the industry keeps shifting around them. That doesn't make them perfect. It makes them intentional. And intentional brands attract intentional riders. You'll notice Suzuki riders don't usually evangelize. They don't need to convince you. They don't care if you buy one. They just quietly ride theirs. That confidence unsettles people, because in a world where validation is currency, indifference looks like arrogance. But it's not arrogance, it's alignment. Suzuki understands that motorcycles aren't meant to be constantly justified. They're meant to be used, to be trusted, to be relied on, to start every morning, to get you home every night, to survive mistakes, to forgive bad roads and imperfect inputs. That philosophy creates bikes that feel human. Not flawless, but faithful. And that's why people either love Suzuki or don't understand it at all. If you're the kind of rider who wants to feel special just by owning something, Suzuki might leave you cold. But if you're the kind of rider who wants to feel special while riding, really riding, Suzuki makes a lot more sense. There's something deeply satisfying about a machine that doesn't ask for attention. That doesn't care if it's trending. That doesn't need to prove itself every year. It just shows up, does the job, and waits for the next ride. In many ways, Suzuki feels like a quiet protest against modern motorcycle culture. A reminder that the ride itself is still the point. That joy doesn't need an algorithm. That identity doesn't need approval. And maybe that's why this topic sparks so much emotion. Because it forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. Do we ride for ourselves? Or for how it looks when we do? Suzuki has already answered that question. Loudly. By staying quiet. So I'll leave you with this thought. Next time you're stopped at a traffic light, surrounded by bikes that feel like statements, look down at the one you're on. Ask yourself not what it says about you, but how it makes you feel when the light turns green. That feeling? That's the real metric. If this conversation got you thinking, subscribe to Superbike Intelligence. Share your take in the comments. Agree, disagree, argue respectfully. Let's talk about why we ride, what we value, and what really matters when the road opens up. Because motorcycles are more than content, and riders are more than an audience.